To the Alrighty, okay. Dark bleatings, everybody. If you've been following the channel or my website for any length of time, it will come as no surprise to you whatsoever that I have Kit Power back. I think this is the third time I've swayed
Yeah,
you.
could be three. Yeah, could be the three Pete.
So, Kit Power for the uninitiated, and you have to unfuck that immediately, by the way, is an author of fiction, non-fiction. He wrote My Life in Horror, which was a long-running Ginger Nuts of Horror series, which has now been handed over to George Daniel Lee. So I think I don't even know if I found you through fiction or non-fiction initially, Kit. It's going back quite a bit now. I can't quite remember. Um, has been a finalist a couple of times now for awards, which you deserve, I have to say.
Thank you.
Um, and we are here to talk about a brand new book, very exciting project. So, Kit, would you like to explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I mean, the book that I've got coming out October 13th is called Exploring the Labyrinth, Volume One, and basically it's a non-fiction project that I started after My Life in Horror because I got to the point in My Life in Horror I realized it had a finite length to it. There was only so many formative experiences you can claim to have before people might start to question like, well, how formative can something really be if there's hundreds of them, right? So I think that essay project ended up tapping out at 60, which felt about right. And I'd started writing nonfiction purely as a vehicle to get attention for my fiction work. And somewhere in the My Life in Horror project, I realized that it was actually something that I enjoyed independently of the fiction and something that I wanted to continue doing. Also, it's worth noting, I guess, that, in between starting that project and now, I have realized, I got diagnosed with ADHD, which is something that I've had all my life but not been aware of. And one of the D or is it a symptom? Is it a superpower? Depends on the day. Could be either. But multiple projects are good for me. They're good for my brain. They're good for my productivity. I work faster working on two projects than I do working on one, and that's weird, but that's just how my brain works. So I knew I wanted to keep doing nonfiction. I knew I wanted a nonfiction strand to continue with my writing, and exploring the labyrinth. I can't remember exactly where it came from. I'd read at the point that I started the project, Brian Keene's the horror show with Brian Keene podcast was going, and I was an avid listener of that. I didn't know Keene's work at all because he started publishing horror when I stopped reading. I stopped reading horror for a decade around the start of the 2000s. I went on a massive crime jag for a decade. I mean, crime fiction jag. Sorry, didn't
I was
actually
gonna say we should
go out and actually
clarify.
commit crimes. I'm a very, very boring person, but I read about a lot of crimes in a fictional setting over that decade. Okay, that got away from me a little bit. Anyway, but so I missed Brian Keene because he was coming out in 2001, and obviously by the time I was reconnecting with horror, he was a very well established name, and uh, he talked about on the horror show once. He talked about Girl on the Glider, which was one of his novellas, and it was on a 99p Kindle sale, and he just said this is probably the piece I'm proudest of, and so I picked it up on a whim, read it, was just beyond blown away by it. It was just extraordinary piece of work, and then I hit on the idea of, well, why don't I do a deep dive into Keene's work because it's it appealed to me as a project because it's still bounded. I mean, Keene's very prolific. I think at the time I started the project, he had about 50 odd books out. He's up to 60 odd now. So of years, probably a similar length to My Life in Horror, but it has a kind of end point to it. And also it what might appeal to people reading it, what makes it different from My Life in Horror is My Life in Horror was often me revisiting texts that I knew very well
Mhm.
and was kind of already in love with. Whereas this was a first time read. Aside from Girl on the Glider, I didn't know any of Keane's work. And so I'd be coming with a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh perspective. And I thought that might be interesting. And there was a risk that I might not enjoy it. There was a risk that I might get 5 books in and say, what have I done? But I figured it was worth rolling the dice. And based on the strength of Girl on the Glider, I thought it was probably worth a go. So that's what I did. And I actually started writing it before My Life in Horror finished because, again, ADHD. And it was a shiny new thing. So I started writing it. It's taken me 8 years to get to 30 essays, so clearly one or two other things happened in the meantime. I was hoping for a monthly production schedule. I don't think I ever really managed that, actually, with either of my non-fiction projects, to be fair. But yeah, here we are in 2025, and finally I've gotten through 30 essays, and and I've collected them in a book, and that is Exploring the Labyrinth Volume 1.
It's it is fantastic, and there are like several things that I really just love about this as a project and everything. Firstly, well, I'm not surprised it took you a while to get to the end product because it's not just 30 essays, it's reading 30 pieces of work, thinking about them, analyzing them, and then your essays aren't ever like when I write a book review, I'm like, I liked it. The end. Well, no, I do a little bit more than that, but I very rarely like deep dive a book, and the times I do, those reviews take me hours and hours, and it wouldn't you wouldn't even think so with the length of them as they come
Mm,
out. So I can only imagine um the amount of work that went into this because I've read all of your My Life in Horror and I read them as you were posting them, but also the books as well. And
mm,
they're always so thoughtfully written and insightful about the work. And you'll talk about why you relate to things, so they're kind of autobiographical,
mm.
even these essays. And so it's just an extraordinary amount of work. And the subject, which is Brian Keene and his work, is somebody that has been in the horror and the bookish industry for so long and helps a lot of other people, coaches people, and
Mm.
he's like that was one of the first things I knew him for was promoting and helping upcoming authors and people that no one's ever read and things like that. So it's just a lovely way to celebrate the career and the man himself. And I watched the interview obviously that you had with him, and he just seemed so very touched by by the whole project. And yeah, so it's not only just a great piece of work, and obviously it's going to really appeal to the many Brian Keene fans that there are, um, but it's a real testament to your own skill as a non-fiction writer and an avid reader, I think.
I mean, I thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I hope people do enjoy it, and I hope that I hope that I mean, obviously, I hope Keen fans will enjoy it. It's for them, and as I say, when I started out the project, I'd read one Keen book, and I was kind of a fan on the basis of that book and on the basis of the work he did on the horror show, because I think it was a really important thing, that podcast, when it was running. Like, it really made a massive impact on. It was essential listening if you were part of the horror genre, I think, and part of that
Yeah.
community. And it wasn't just. I mean, he was. He was, as you say, he was very, very supportive of up and coming writers, and he still is. He did a lot of mentoring, and he also kind of did a lot of championing of older writers, of writers
Mhm.
whose careers were coming to an end, who he felt weren't getting the attention they deserved and should still be relevant. People should still be talking about. Which I found, I found both of those things really admirable. He also, let's not forget, he took on some really, really tough subject matter as part of that show. He went, he did. He exposed various nefarious, small press publishing things that were going on. He even talked about, talked openly, sometimes, breaking the news almost about, predators that were in the horror genre and stuff like that is. Stuff like that is difficult to talk about. It's dangerous to talk about in legal terms,
Mhm.
right? Like, you have to be really careful. He had a bit of a background in journalism, and he used those talents very carefully to make sure he was expressing what he was saying clearly. But like, you know, he seemed like he seemed like an interesting person, but he also seemed like someone who was trying to do good in the genre and in the world. And I thought, yeah, I thought he'd make a good subject for that reason. But as I say, the risk was just I didn't. A New Girl on the Glider was good, but I also knew that had come out, 10 years after he'd started writing. So there was a risk, I suppose, that, like, you know, how long did he take to get that good, and was he always that good, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I really, I had a good feeling going in,
Mhm.
but I've got to be honest, I liked the risk of it,
Yeah.
because for me, like, My Life in Horror was safe in the sense that I was picking stuff that I knew I'd be able to knock out the park talking about, because it's stuff that I loved, right? Or stuff that I hated occasionally, but mainly stuff that I loved. Either way, stuff that I knew, right?
Yeah.
I liked the first read challenge here. I think that's what really attracted me to it.
Yeah. It's sorry to interrupt. The risk part of this for me that I really admire is again, I write a lot of reviews, and a lot of the books that I am sent for review, like I've made friends with a lot of these authors now, which I love, and it's actually my favorite thing about reviewing because of the number of friends I've made. But it is extremely uncomfortable for me when somebody that I personally now know sends me a book and I don't like it.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, and everybody knows that I try to review everything that
Hmm.
comes to me. And so then I have to sort of say I didn't like the book, and I'm very conscious of
Sure.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
And you didn't just pick, oh, my favorite 15 Brian Keene books. You went, I'm doing the first 30 books.
Yeah.
So that's that's quite a gamble. And I know that you hadn't met Keene at that time, but when you're working on a project like this and it's somebody that you are generally a fan of, that might well see it. At the
Sure.
end. I can only imagine, like, I worry about commenting on Stephen King books I don't like, even though
Right.
he will
Right.
never see anything I said. But I'm like, I'm sorry, Stephen. Um, so it is a dicey territory to go in on in case there could have been something in those 30 that you really hated.
Mm.
So um
I mean, it's a good point. Like, you're right. I was a fan of Keane as a person, but whether or not that meant I'd also be a fan of him as a writer was up in the air. I will say though that I contacted him early in the project. I'd actually, I mean, I liked the horror show enough that I even took out a couple of adverts on the show at one point when I was, I think for my short story collection, A Warning About Your Future Enslavement, I ran an advert for that on the horror show. I may have run one for Godbomb as well. I can't remember, but I certainly ran a couple anyway. And so I'd had a tiny bit of correspondence with him just on that basis. But when I told him about the project, he was immediately, before I'd written anything, before he'd seen anything, he was immediately just so supportive. And he sent me, the first thing he did was sent me a list of the publications and the publication dates for all of it.
mhm,
Some of which was different from the Wikipedia listings and the public listings because he knew, well, yeah, that mass market came out in 2009, but actually the first publication was in 2007 because it was this
mhm.
limited hardback. So if you want to do them in strict publication order, you need to do it like this. So I mean, and for people who are wondering how we got to the table of contents for the first 30, that's how. So don't take it up with me, take it up with Keane, and don't take it up with Keane because he's right. Okay.
Well, that is actually the order, so that's
Yeah,
the
exactly. Like he
definitive
knows what he's
listing.
doing. Trust me. Like it's fine. Actually, what if we got on that just to be super clear as well? Like the only exception to that is short story collections because I'm going to be covering them
Yeah.
in the complete short works of Brian Keene, which he's publishing at the moment. So I'll be taking them slightly out. Yeah, that's a volume two task to get to, which I am excited about because I've read some of his short stories as backups to some of the novellas, and he's turns out he's quite good at short stories as well. So I'm
Of
looking forward
course
to
he
reading all
is.
that. Like, yeah, right. Who'd have guessed? But the other thing that he said in that exchange, which was super valuable, and I kind of needed to hear at the start of the project, he said like, I'm not going to get the exact wording right, but he basically said like, at some point, by the way, you're going to read something you don't like. Don't worry about it.
Hmm.
Like, it's part of the process. It's absolutely fine. Just, don't worry about it. Just be honest. Just be honest about your reactions. And that was super helpful because I was nervous about it. And I was that thing of like, I'm not quite sure. I didn't know how much I was going to enjoy this stuff. And I mean, this actually, let's talk about this for a second because you talk about review policies earlier, made me think about like, because my review policy is I don't review stuff I don't like. I
Hmm.
don't review stuff I don't finish or I don't like. I just don't. And and I'm clear about that. I publicize that often. So I think people, because I do worry people think, oh, only gives positive reviews. And it's like, well, yeah, because if it was going to be a negative review, I don't write it. I don't think anyone needs help not selling books, right? So
Yeah.
it's a personal thing, and also because I'm a writer, and the same thing that you were saying. Like I'm friends with some people. Like I don't necessarily want to upset anybody. So I'd rather if I don't like, if you haven't got anything nice to say, etc. But
Yeah.
but this project, I couldn't do that. I didn't have that option because I had to review every book. If I was going to do it the way I said I was going to do it, I've got to review everything. And also, like, I wanted to trace his development as a writer. Part of the project idea that appealed to me was like, again, knowing he was getting to Girl on a Glider and knowing how good that was, like, what was his journey to get there as a writer? And he is like one of the things that I've definitely tracked across the first 30. He's a better writer in book 30 than he was in book one. And I'm not saying The Rising is a bad book. It's not. It's good, but you can see the development of his talent
I
throughout the
love that
process.
when you read someone's chronological works, it's so much fun.
Mm.
Yeah, I think my first Keene book was The Darkness at the Edge of Town, and I picked that
Oh
up.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think I was just probably just in the Books of Horror Facebook group or something. I know it was Facebook that led me there. And it was just like, have you tried Brian Keene? Whatever I asked, the answer was, have you tried Brian Keene? And I was like, who's Brian Keene? And it was like, what do you, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And it didn't even occur to me that people watching or listening to this might not know. But if you don't know somehow who Brian Keene is, he is the other side of the pond to us. He's in the USA, very, very well known and liked in the horror community, has been publishing fiction for years, used to blog a lot, so a lot of non-fiction. He ran the horror show podcast. Um, so a lot of people found him in lots of different ways. He also organizes conventions, in particular the AuthorCon Scares That Care, and that's for charity. So he does a lot. Um, but the Darkness at the Edge of Town, I think I loved that book, and I think that I described it as it's like the mist meets under the dome
Mm.
to me. And I just thought, oh, okay, yeah, this is why everybody is like really angry that I'd never heard of Brian Keene. I get it now. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't read as much of his work as you have, so far, but I'm trying. It's just a lot of books out there.
Sure, yeah, yeah, there's a lot out in
Yeah.
the world. I mean, it's an interesting point, right? It's one of the things I realized. I'm not sure how big Keen's European and UK following is compared to the US either. I mean, he's, as you say, he's very, very well known in the US. He's still kind of, and he's still very visible. He does a lot of conventions. Obviously, Scares That Care is a charity that he's heavily involved in, and he's helped run that event for a number of years. Vortex Comics has become
Oh
and books
yeah.
has become something of a pilgrimage site for fans of him.
Yeah, that's his physical book and comic shop that he runs with
Yeah,
Mary San Giovanni.
that's right.
For those
Yeah,
who
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. With Mary San Giovanni, his wife, and also celebrated and very talented horror author,
Yeah,
and
she's amazing.
she's so good.
She's great.
Um,
What a couple.
Yeah, no, it's kind of it's a little bit unfair really on the rest of the world, but there you go.
Please save some talent for the rest of us.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Idiots.
really, it's a bit outrageous. But anyway, um, so yeah, so I think it was. I know he does have a UK fan base for sure because a lot of people when I started the project, um, I did get people reach out to me saying, "Oh man, this is really cool. I'm glad someone's doing this." And they were all people who remembered him, actually, as you were saying, from his old blogging days and old bulletin board days as well, like the
Mhm.
early horror bulletin board. Because I think he was a fairly early adopter as far as internet concerns. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so there were, and again, there was that amazing sort of the early internet communities when everyone wasn't on the internet. Therefore, if you were on there, it was kind of a big deal. But it meant that for a little while, if artists of certain caliber wanted to make themselves accessible by bulletin boards and things like that, you could actually have direct conversations. And I think a lot of people, I talked to a lot of people in the UK. I won't name names because I didn't ask permission to do it, but a lot of people now who are indie horror authors themselves in the UK and reviewers and other people as well would say like, oh yeah, they remember like actually being able to talk to Keane, and that felt like a massive deal that you could chat to him on these bulletin boards and stuff in the early days of I can't remember even
Mhm.
what it was called, like HorrorNet or something. Um, but yeah, so he does have a UK fan base for sure, but I don't know.
So
Okay,
sorry.
was that a cat?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
I don't know why, but he leapt through, bashed the door open in a leap. So he came through at a weird height. And I don't know what I thought it was. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
Go
No, it
on.
was. I mean, it barely registered on the. He was moving fast enough that he almost fooled the camera completely. But
Jesus Christ. Sorry.
it's okay.
I was
No,
so
it's fine.
startled.
It's,
Sorry, go on.
no, I was clearly going. The cat decided to intervene because I was clearly rambling. Anyway, yeah. So he's got a UK fan base, and but obviously, yeah, he's very, very, very well known in the US. And I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess one of the things I'm hopeful for with the project is that yeah, if we can get a few, if get him a few more UK readers, that would be fantastic. He deserves it because he's a fantastically talented writer. So that would feel really good. That would feel like a really good outcome for the project.
He actually, I was at a book event last night where Brian Keene came up in
Right.
conversation. Everybody knows him.
Mm,
I think even if he does, he undoubtedly has a wider readership in the US than he does here in the UK.
sure.
But he's one of those names that even if people haven't read any of his work, everyone are like, "Oh yeah, no, I've heard of Brian Keene." Like
Mm,
it's very rare that I don't know if I've ever been in a conversation where he's come up and someone's gone, "Oh, who's that?"
right.
Oh, I think he might be more well known by name than he even thinks he is
Mm,
around the place. But yeah, I think fans of you, because I'm one of those fans of you that even if I
sure.
don't know the subject of the book, I'm going to read the book that you wrote because I know I'm going to enjoy your writing and then I will be interested in the thing that you're writing about, like the Tommy book.
Sure.
I had no idea what that was going into, but I became interested. So yeah, I think it's a project like this is a kind of nice way to bridge a very physical gap because I feel
Sure.
like there's a UK horror scene and a US horror scene, but
Yeah.
really we're all one gigantic transatlantic family
Yeah.
that don't know each other very. It's like distant cousins.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a
Um,
good project for connecting more people.
well, yeah, and I definitely experienced that. I mean, when I went over in March for Scares That Care. And at that point, I didn't know for sure that I was going to be putting this out this year, by the way. Like that was just but I definitely got that sense of like horror fans are horror fans world over, and actually horror writers are horror writers world over, and
Mm.
it was such a welcoming community. It was such a lovely, and I felt right at home, straight away. The conversations, the jokes, the after hours drinking conversations, gossip, all of it. It all felt exactly like the UK scene. And yeah, and the fans are just they're the fans. They're amazing. They're just as kind of, knowledgeable and rabid and excited and as they are in the UK. So yeah, I mean I hope it does. Yeah, anything that helps connect those communities is good because I think the other thing that I know Keane has anxiety about because he talked about it in his non-fiction book End of the Road, which is another phenomenal book. That I highly recommend. But he talks in there about how he did so he had his first big five book come out in a very long time. I think it was, God, I'm going to mess this up now because he had Pressure and he had the Complex, and they both came out at the same time. One of them was Big Five and the other one wasn't. I think
Mhm.
Pressure was the Big Five, but I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He was doing a book tour on the back of those two books. And one of the things that he reported in End of the Road was being kind of flummoxed by fans who were like, "Man, I thought you'd stop writing."
Mm.
And the reason was because he hadn't been Big Five published for a while, and all of his stuff had been going out through small presses, which meant it hadn't been making it on the bookshelf, on the bookshelves of Big Five, sorry, of chain stores in the same way that they had in the past. So people just didn't realize, like a non-trivial percentage of his audience thought he'd stopped writing because most readers, I guess, buy books from bookshops and that's it. They don't, you know what I mean? They're not. I mean, we're odd, right? We're super fans. We follow individual writers. We'll go to their websites. We'll sign up to newsletters. We'll blah blah blah, right? But
That's
most
not
people
odd.
don't.
Totally normal obsessive
I,
behavior.
I, I'm not. It's not a value judgment. It's
Yeah.
unusual statistically, is all I'm trying to say.
Oh
Like,
yes, yeah.
and I think, that was a kind of, it was, I mean, it's an important moment in that book, and it's a kind of wake up call for all of us in a certain way, I guess. But it got me thinking as well. It got me thinking about like, yeah, anything you can do, I think that helps keep people visible and keeps work out there is probably a good thing to be doing.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's something that Keane and I get into in the interview, which you mentioned earlier, which he was kind enough to agree to do for the book. That again, and it ties in what we were saying earlier about the way that Brian, has been very, very supportive and promoting and helping with new writers, but also and also at the same time helping to promote, older writers and their work. And I think it it's really important for a genre to be alive to its history, be alive to the present, and enthusiastic about the future. You need all of that going on at the same time, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Gives you a greater appreciation for things that are up and coming when you know the influences and
Yeah,
how the path was carved in the first place. And
absolutely.
people thinking that Brian stopped writing because he moved to indie presses or smaller
Yeah,
publishing.
yeah,
That's why I think it's so important to support indie publishing and try to make people aware
100%.
of it because you're always going to see big five books in Tesco, Walmart, wherever. They're everywhere. And you
Yeah,
can just, pick anything up from one of those shops. But people who aren't in the know are not going to know about indie
yeah,
publishing because people have no marketing budget. It's all you have to do it online. Trying to get things into bookshops is a completely different process.
yep.
Um, so yeah, I think that's why this book that you've written here, I think is it. I agree. Brian said this as well, and I am paraphrasing, but this is like a important book. I think this is like a landmark project, and I agree with Brian that I hope that more people follow suit and do similar projects because there's a lot of work that you've covered in there that even Keene fans might not even know.
Sure. And I mean, and I hope that because it's a first, especially because it's a first read, I hope that that naivety maybe will have helped. Maybe I'll have seen stuff that more diehard Keen fans either might not have seen or might have forgotten. They might find observations in there that surprise them, that challenge
Mhm.
them. I mean, even maybe piss them off from time to time. That'd be fine. I don't mind. Reactions are good, you know. But yeah, I hope. I mean, I love the idea because this is the thing. It's the same thing with My Life in Horror. I mean, when I got to the end of that project and I was talking to Jim about it, and we were both kind of feeling a bit sad to see it go. And I remember hitting that point of just saying like, but anyone could do this. Do you know,
Mm,
like, anyone could do a My Life in Horror project. It doesn't because you know, it would have to be different because your top 60 childhood influences are not going to be the same as mine.
mhm.
Are not going to be the same as whoever else takes the project on, right? Like they're not. So it's got infinite malleability, and I don't. I mean, do I own the copyright to My Life in Horror? I probably do actually at this point because I published two books of that. But you know what I mean? Like the
Mm.
concept, anyone could do the concept, and I'm probably not going to sue anyway unless you make a lot of money off it
You're like, hey.
and give me no credit. Exactly. But this is the same. Like anyone, like there's tons of, well, not tons, but there's enough writers out there of a similar level of productivity to Keene, of a similar level of talent to Keene, who are out there who, you know, for whom it would be rewarding to do this kind of deep dive on. And it doesn't, I mean, the first read thing I like because it was a challenge for me. It wouldn't have to be a first read.
Mhm.
And I think, look, I mean, you and I are both, you know, Stephen King fanatics, right? I mean, we are. But there's a lot of there's a lot of King book projects out there. There just are, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I don't, I'm not slagging anyone off who's written a King book, by the way, because I understand the temptation. I read non-fiction books about King. I can't get enough of them. Like it's not, I'm not criticizing anyone, but I think that I hope that the value of this is it's about, you know, no one else is making Stephen King money, but there's a hell of a lot of writers out there that are producing amazing fiction, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of them deserve a bit of spotlight as well. I mean, it's not, you know, this is not an either or, right? It's all valid. It's all. I mean, Billy Martin's writing a King book at the moment. I cannot wait to read that. You know, that
Oh
is going to
man, I
be
can't. Yeah, that's a
extraordinary,
perspective I would love
right?
yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's the thing. Unless you have a new angle on somebody like King, I
Mm.
this is also why I've read everything he's written, and I feel like I could talk about if what's that show where you have an expert topic and they ask you questions?
Sure, sure. Like
Like,
Mastermind.
yeah, like I feel like I could mastermind the shit out of Stephen King
Sure.
stuff, but I've read all of Bev Vincent's Stephen King nonfiction. Bev Vincent, who has blurbed Kit's Exploring the Labyrinth, by the way.
Yeah, that was a moment, I gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I was like, oh, I have nothing to add. And also Bev gets like little inside info because he's friends with King.
sure,
So
sure, sure.
he can actually ask him questions and things.
Yeah.
So it is nice to, yeah, I love these kinds of projects. And it might have been a really long time, or maybe it would never have got done at all for Brian, who's a very deserving author
Sure.
to have this kind of exploration of his work. But he's, this is another thing you and Brian discussed. He
Mm.
works in horror, which is worldwide still looked down on,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
kind of panned, dismissed. And whenever anything is a smash success, if it's horror, they say, oh, it's a thriller or it's
Yeah, yeah.
sci-fi, or it gets rebranded because people just, for some reason, will not give horror its due. And this was a conversation that came up in it was Chris Golden and Tim Lebbon's book tour that I was at
Yeah.
last night, and they were talking about this, about how people who don't read horror just assume that all horror is slasher films
Yeah.
because that's mainstream horror.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so much more. Not that there's anything wrong with the slasher genre, but
Sure.
there's much more there, and people seem to think that there's no artistry or nuance or
Mm.
um, meaning. Where I find a
Right.
lot of meaning. Like I pretty much exclusively read horror fiction because I
Sure.
personally find that it has the greatest examples of feminist characters and women written well.
Mm.
And they're always underdog stories about people with struggles, and we all have struggles, and I find them all
Yeah.
very relatable. Well,
Sure.
not all. I've never been in an Eric LaRocca kind of book situation, for example, but he writes about common human emotions. So,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely. I mean, I'd hope very few of us have, to be fair. That's not anywhere anyone wants to end up. No, it's a great point. And I was thinking about, I mean, there's a couple of things I was thinking about there. One was about, I mean, to pick up on your last point about horror and particularly about the kind of characters and the kind of situations horror writes about. I think that's right. And I mean, I talk about it in the essay and in the interviews. I talk about Keene's focus on working class characters in particular. And
mhm,
I mean, one of the things I think he does that's actually important about his work is it's a really vivid snapshot. I mean, the first sort of series, the first 30 that I've read, which covers pretty much the first 10 years of his career, it that 10-year period was a very tumultuous one for the American working class, actually.
mhm,
And it's never the subject of the story because the stories are horror stories, and the subject of the story is, your town's been cut off by darkness and it's driving everyone mad, or, the dead are walking, or, yeah, you've got terminal cancer and you decided to rob a bank. I mean so it's always happening in the background, but it's still there. It's a thread that runs through all of them, and you end up with this kind of you do end up with this kind of social history
mhm.
and a social history of a class of people that don't get written about because
Yep.
it's working class characters, and Keene's representation is good. They're working class characters. This is not white working class characters. He has characters that are people of color. He has characters from different faiths. He has characters, what they've got in common is for the most part is their class denomination. They're not making a great deal of money. They're working tough manual jobs for the most part.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're working two or three jobs. Money's always a problem, and like I think there is a value to that, and it's like, I mean, I've got this kind of wider theory about this with pulp in general. Like pulp literature is, sorry, pulp genre fiction in particular, as you say, it's always looked down upon. But when we think about most of the stuff actually that we think of now as classics, or a lot of the stuff anybody think of now as classics, they were actually pulp entertainment at the time they were being made.
Mhm.
Dickens is taught in schools still to this day. But when Dickens was coming out, it was absolutely pulp. It was serialized. It was massively mainstream. It was the EastEnders of its day, actually. It came out in installments. People were desperate to catch up and see what happened next. He was paid by the word, and my God, sometimes you can tell, in my opinion. You know, um, and Dickens wasn't writing that, I don't think, was not writing that stuff with an eye to like, I can't wait till, 100 years time when kids are still going to be tortured with the fucking Pickwick Papers. Like, I don't think that was in his
Mhm.
head. I think he was just writing, he was just
Yeah.
writing to a deadline and writing fast and writing this stuff. And, Arthur Conan Doyle, same thing. Like, I mean, he wasn't paid by the word, and you can tell that as well because some of his short stories end two-thirds of the way through because he realizes he's his work out and he's not going to get paid anymore. But they're still amazing, the Sherlock Holmes stories, and again, they're now considered, classics of literature. But most of those were written very fast.
Mhm.
And again, Keene's got that because he's prolific, and he's prolific. And this is not an I was going to say it's ironic. It's not ironic at all. It's all part of the same point. He's prolific because he's also working class. He's also from a blue collar background, and actually, he's making money, but he's not, as he says, making Stephen King money because no one is.
Yeah.
And actually, he wrote that fast for a long time because he needed the money, like to
Yeah.
keep his head above water. And I think that's something that doesn't get talked about very much when it comes to, the thing about being a professional writer.
Hmm.
It's like, it's even if you have quote unquote made it, even if you've got like, I mean, in his case, big five or a good mid-list publisher, because there aren't any good mid-list publishers anymore, and that's a whole other story that maybe I'll get into in volume four or something. I don't know, but yeah, but it's still like you live in hand to mouth a lot of the time, and it's lumpy, and also you're dealing with publishers, and some of them are good and some of them aren't, and some of them badger you for 6 months for a book, and then they get it out of you, and then when it comes time for the royalty check, you have to chase them and chase them and chase them. Like, and I think the social history of it is one of the things that stuck with me the most across the 30 books. It's really fascinating, and as I say, it's not center stage. Center stage is always the story because he is first and foremost a storyteller and a damn good one. But it's a really powerful part of the work, and I think it's just really valuable. It's really valuable to have that, and it's a real privilege to feel like I was able to examine it. You know what I mean? In this format.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
There's great value in reading an author's work that spans a time because you can dip in and out of any decade you want for literature and books and fiction and everything. But the social progression feels more charted to me if you're following an
yeah,
author's work through their life because you can kind of see the state of things as they were living through it because society and all of our struggles and everything is always reflected through the fiction of the time.
yeah,
And what better, most of us, I don't know why people resist this label, but most of us are working class. So
right, yeah,
the number of times I've heard someone tell me that they're middle class and what they mean is that they have a 30K a year job.
sure,
And like, not that that's not bad, like a 30K,
sure,
I'd love a 30K a year job, but
sure,
it's like, well, no, but you're still on the same sort of grindstone as everybody at like
absolutely,
earning your money, obviously, but we're all still working however many hours a day and
yeah,
have very little free time. And you can't just frivolously spend money without considering it. Like,
hmm,
I knew one legitimately middle class person in my entire life.
sure,
And he didn't even tell us because he wanted us to think he was normal and he was afraid he
right,
wouldn't have friends. So he just worked in a shitty bar with us all
right,
for minimum wage.
right,
Um, and so I do feel like this kind of writing and these kinds of books are in like I just feel more of a sense of kinship with these
yeah,
authors,
yeah,
because there is always, I got a completely different life experience to Brian.
yeah,
I'm a, woman living in the UK. I'm a bit younger than him, and I grew up with different things, but there's such relatable stuff,
absolutely,
things I recognize, and I think they're good teaching tools if you're reading a bit further back through his work as well, because you can see in some ways how things have changed because it's
yeah,
not just it's like the progression of horror, what was popular in horror as it goes through, and then also what's happening in society. Even
yeah,
language, how language changes over time, you can see when an author's
yep,
been writing for that long. So,
yeah.
yeah, it is really. Sorry, I just blabbed on for so long then,
No,
but
not at
um,
all. I mean, it's all. Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I mean, I want to come back to what you said about relatability, though, because that's one of the things that I found interesting. Because Keene and I are actually we're both Gen X, but he's like early Gen X, and I'm like tail end Gen X. So, in some ways, there are always little indicators I get with Keene that he's, obviously he is older than me by almost a decade, I think, somewhere around there. But I find him more relatable than not, if that makes sense.
mhm,
So it's normally cultural signifiers will be the thing because you know he's an Anthrax guy because when he was 16, 17, they were massive. By the time
mhm,
I was 16, 17, Anthrax weren't as big. Do you know what I mean? Like I knew who they were, but they were kind of a bit yesterday's band, and Rage Against the Machine were the biggest thing in the world, when I was that age.
mhm.
So there's those little cultural signifiers that are just, but it's not far away enough that I can't relate to it. And actually, I mean, yeah, it is different in material ways, But I did, I grew up in small town rural North Devon, and there are a lot of similarities as well. There really are. That life. I mean, it's one of the things I talk about. Like, I hate that life. I hate small town so much. I found it claustrophobic. I found it stifling. I found it just really
Judgmental.
yeah, just unpleasant. Just like I didn't like everyone knowing everybody. I didn't like the fact that that you know people had so little going on in their lives that they spent the whole time gossiping about each other. I didn't like,
Mm.
everybody been in each other's business, and I didn't like that whole thing. Oh, well, you always know where people are. Why is that a good thing? I want to be on my own sometimes. I don't want to, you know what I mean? And Keene obviously feels very differently about it. I mean, that's a really interesting thing that I noticed. Dark Hollow is a good example of it, where he has a conversation with his neighbors, and they're just clearly, and Keene clearly loves it, but he's such a good writer that even though he loves it, I was reading it thinking, yeah, that's everything I hate right there. So he portrays it realistically enough, honestly enough, that even though his affection for it comes through, it still kind of triggered my antipathy and anxiety, which I think I mean, that's a testament to his talent, but it's also a testament to the thing about like actually, yeah, not to get too sort of lefty revolution about this, but like we do have more in common as working
Mm.
class people than we have that divides us. Absolutely, way more.
Yeah.
And I've got more in common with a working class person, regardless of how different they are to me in terms of their gender identity or orientation or skin color or anything, than I have to any billionaire on this planet. A lot more.
Yeah, I find um yeah, for anyone who's listening to this that hasn't read Keene, the thing that I like about Keene's work, completely different writing styles and everything, but it's the same thing that I'm really attached to King's work for is,
Mm,
and he said this in your interview with him as well, that it's important to tell the truth about people. So you can
yeah,
love where you're from and you can love your neighbors and everything. But if we're all being honest, there are always downsides that should be acknowledged if you're trying to paint a full picture. And he was talking about that in regards to like race and handling racist characters and things. And it's
yeah,
important to, it's really uncomfortable to go there and it's uncomfortable to read, but that's because it's true. And
yeah,
so whenever I've read any of his work or anyone else's work where those kinds of scenarios come up, it really takes me back to a very specific time in my hometown.
right.
And I was in Weatherspoons with a mixed race friend, and a guy just came over, an older guy, and he just sat down and was like, "Oh, yeah, girls, I haven't seen either of you around here before." And we are like, "Oh, well, we're both born and bred, live here, blah, blah, blah." And then he just honed in on her and was like, "Oh, so who are your parents then? Do I know them?" And he didn't know them. And then he asked where she was from again. She
Mm,
said, and then he was like, "Oh, something about that's not ringing true to me. Where are your parents from?" She was like, "Born and bred here, grandparents born and bred here." And I was like, "Why don't you just fucking say the thing that you mean?
yeah,
You
yeah,
saw you saw somebody that wasn't white enough for you, came over, and
yeah,
you won't take her word for it that she like it was crazy to me." And so it really bothers me when I'm reading a book and there's like an idyllic town painted as
yeah,
if there is no one like that. Like, because small towns, I do think, are kind of worse for
yeah,
this percentage
yeah. I
wise
agree.
than
I
bigger
agree.
cities.
I agree.
I've got another mixed race friend that once commented that they no longer feel very welcome in Welsh Valleys towns because they grew up with a lot of racism, and people that this guy grew up with started commenting, telling him, "How dare you? This town isn't racist." And I
Right.
was like, he's literally just given examples of things that happened
Yeah.
to him, and the people that he's supposedly friends with are offended.
Right.
It's like, yeah, so sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but like, yeah, this kind of small town working class experience from a writer that doesn't hold these kinds of prejudices, and
Yeah.
it's I will say similar worldview to me,
Yeah.
morals,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's it does, I find comfort in um Keene's work in that because sometimes you feel a bit alone with your
Yeah.
outrage about
Absolutely.
various things, but then when you read a book by an author that clearly shares that, you're like, okay, no, it's
Yeah.
the entire world isn't mad.
It's a good point, and to pick up directly on what you're saying. I mean, Keene, as I say, Keene clearly has an affection for that small town life, which I personally don't share. But you're right; he's very clear-eyed about it, and he's not shy about highlighting where the problems with that are, and where there are pockets of prejudice and stuff like that. And he's again, he writes about relentlessly about working class blue collar characters, but they're not. These are not eulogies. These are not
Mm,
idyllic versions. These are real people, and they have flaws, and they have prejudices. They have, behaviors that we would find reprehensible. I mean, all human life is here, and I think that's an enormous part of the power of his work, and I like that. I mean, I don't. You're right. It's that commitment to honesty, because otherwise it would fall apart. It would absolutely collapse. I mean, you talked about Darkness on the Edge of Town, and I think that it's a great example of what we're talking about. Like the whole. I mean, for those of you who haven't read it, just the basic premise is so that the population of a small town wake up one day and the entire town is surrounded by a barrier of darkness, and that barrier is impenetrable. Anyone who goes into it doesn't come out. There's no sunrise, there's no sunset, there's no weather, and there's no communication whatsoever with the outside world, if it even exists anymore. So that's the premise. But the other thing that becomes very clear quite early on in the book is that the darkness itself has a certain amount of psychic energy and malevolence, and it
mhm,
is infecting the people in the town. It's not just the psychological impact of no daylight. It's actually working on their minds. It's working on their psyches in a supernatural way, and it's encouraging them towards their worst impulses and worst instincts. And that's, I mean, as I say, it's in the essay. It's one of the best horror premises I've ever come across. It's
yeah.
up there. I mean, you talked about it being like the mist meets Under the Dome, and like that's the physical setup is that, but I think psychologically, it's genuinely, I think it's more interesting than both of those, because it's got this extra element of like, and something is working on the minds of the people in that space to
Yeah.
push them to, yeah,
There's also a little like dairy main flavor in there, like for that
absolutely,
like background kind of like darkness,
yeah,
as
yeah,
well as the
yeah,
very obvious darkness.
yeah.
Yeah, any King comparison I ever draw is always a massive compliment.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very much its own, completely its own story, but it's
Yeah.
just the feelings I got reading some of those other books. I was like, oh, this is giving me the creeps
Yeah.
in the same way. Like,
No,
um,
absolutely. And I love, I mean, there's actually a lovely moment in Darkness where he can take Keen's actually self-aware enough and has enough courage to even shout out the mist, which I think is a beautiful moment, and it's
mhm,
genuinely funny. But and well, the characters call it out actually, which is lovely. But I think to talk about what you were saying, the thing about that makes it for me makes it really impressive is it's a first-person narrative. So part of what's going on is the writer is charting the collapse of the town, but he's also charting his own psychological descent.
mhm.
And that means, like he's digging deep into, Keen to write that has to dig deep into, so what are my negative impulses? If the darkness was surrounding me, what are the things? And I'm not saying that the characters are his, because that would be a mistake to say that. We make these characters up, and they have their own, and this sounds strange, but it's true, they have their own interiority, their own logic. So I'm not saying that this guy in this story is his darknesses are Keen's darknesses, but I'm saying he must have done some digging to get
Mhm.
that right of some kind. And I think it adds an extra layer of unsettling to the whole narrative, right? Because I think the lead character in Darkness is basically a good guy, right? Like he's basically an okay human being at the start of the story.
Mhm.
And the notion that we've all got that capacity in us for cruelty, for violence, for, you know, yeah, for to deliver emotional, psychological harm to each other, to, like it's an uncomfortable thing to think about.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's unflinching. And I think it's, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of really good books in the first 30, but Darkness is up there. I mean, it's an extraordinary piece of work.
Yeah, I think that's still my favorite
Mm.
Keene book. It was my first Keene book. Great one to go in on.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Um, and yeah, it's still a reigning champ for me,
Yeah.
for Keene's work. Um, yeah, there's something about the way that he tells stories, like anything that can make me sort of reflect on my worst moments, very
Mm.
uncomfortable. But
Right,
again, if we're all being honest about ourselves, we've all been dicks at some point.
right. Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
intentionally or not,
Yeah,
your intention doesn't always match the outcome
that's right.
when other people are involved. And so it's kind of a weird thing to enjoy about reading.
Mm.
Um, but think it makes us better people if we can sort of reflect on things, relate to things. And if we feel uncomfortable, it's hopefully because we're not in that headset anymore in mind space, you know what I mean? So like maybe you've grown
Yeah.
a bit. You remember a decision you made 15 years ago that you'd go, oh God, no. Now. So
I mean, we've talked about this before, but I genuinely do think this is why horror genre writers in particular are some of, pound for pound, there's always exceptions, but like,
Mhm.
as a percentage, I'll take horror writers over almost any other area or genre of writing, even like just the kindest, right?
Mhm.
Friendliest, most welcoming, bunch of people you're ever going to meet. And I genuinely think it's because we do our shadow work. We do it on the
Mhm.
page, right? We when we sit at the keyboard, we're digging into like, okay, what terrifies me? What scares me about other people? What scares me about myself? What do I dislike the most? What am I most afraid of? That's where we live. That's where we have to live to do the work we do, right? So we get to explore all of those kind of ugly feelings and thoughts and possibilities, and we ask ourselves the question, okay, now what if? What if? What if? What if you had terminal cancer and you had 3 months to live and you needed to feed your family? What if you feel like that and then the darkness comes down and suddenly, or what if the zombies are walking around or, like, and I think, I think that's, I think in the process of doing that, in the process of writing that stuff down, you do, to a degree, you kind of exorcise it from yourself, or at least you kind of, I don't know. I mean, I always, regardless of what the book is, I always know myself a little bit better after I've written a work of fiction.
Yeah, something my husband said. My husband, by the way, doesn't read for fun very often, and he doesn't read horror.
Right.
But something he said gave me an epiphany about horror authors. I have said this maybe on my channel, maybe elsewhere before, but I was saying to him that when I go to conventions, and the balance, they do tend to be a lot more men
Yeah.
than any other group at these things. But it's the only big group of people that I never ever feel like obviously you have to be on guard for certain things, and I'm not saying
Hmm.
like just go in with abandon, but I feel very safe
Sure.
um around the men that I'm friends with in the horror community. And I honestly have never once had any man in a live setting at a convention make me feel uncomfortable.
Sure.
People talk to me about my reviews. They ask me about if I write. People seem genuinely interested in, like, I'm a human being. Which, like, and I'm not saying that all men in other spaces don't act like this, but also, uh, I mean, yeah. And
Right.
I said, I wonder what it is about horror authors that makes these men are so comfortable for me to be around, and I don't
Mm.
know why it is. My husband said maybe it's because they spend a lot of time in the minds of the women that they're writing in horrible scenarios,
Yeah.
overcoming horror topics or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe it's because they just have more empathy. They've spent a lot more time putting themselves in women's shoes than maybe people in other groups, like the
Mm.
average man. And I was like, that is very insightful. Someone that's never gone to one of these conventions and
Sure.
doesn't even read horror fiction. But I was like, and that made me think, just general in a sense of just empathy, I do think horror writers have a
Yeah.
lot more of it because of that basic thing, I think, because we're uh so and I feel it at these conventions. I was just saying to my brother today that I don't feel completely comfortable anyway, apart from at these conventions, because I
Yeah.
don't feel like people think I'm weird. I have a thing where there's social anxiety when I'm in groups where I panic that people don't really want me there and I'm annoying everyone if I talk, but I don't feel that way
Mm.
in these spaces. I think
Yeah.
people are just generally kind. And
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, that was just like a massive shouty out ramble about
No,
how nice all these people are, but
I think horror convention. The other place I think, and you may or may not agree with this, I don't know, but the other place I think I get that is metal shows. Yeah. Isn't it? It's
Like,
crazy, right? Like, and I mean, it's something that again, it's something that I covered a bit with Keene in the interview. I mean, we sort of spoke about it tangentially and then went off in another direction, but like, it is key to me, and I think the key in both cases is like the genres that are widely misunderstood, widely disliked, always ghettoized, never mainstream, even though they're wildly popular. And I keep, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about. The last couple of months, obviously since Ozzy's passing and the show that they did, the last show, the Back to the Beginning thing, in Birmingham, and it was, like it was incredibly moving. It was moving at the time. It was moving even before, and then obviously less than 3 weeks later, Ozzy passing away, it gains an extra poignancy. But there was a real feeling of like what I loved about that show, I think, and the idea of the show, the concept of it was the entire community, the entire metal community coming together and just being
mm,
like, no, we're gonna do this. We're gonna honor this guy who is, you know, obviously one of the Mount Rushmore figures. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but Sabbath did invent metal. I mean, I'm sorry, they did. Yeah, there were a few hard rock bands before Sabbath that did some of the things that Sabbath did on some songs. There's always musical precursors to a moment. But Sabbath were the first band where they made that their entire identity, and they were the first band that took it forward the way they did. And again, not to turn this into the Black Sabbath podcast, but also like, over the 8 records they did with Ozzy, like they progressed every single time. They were developing, they were growing the sound, they were being, they were pushing in new directions every single time. They were relentlessly creative. And I feel like it was interesting because you got all this stuff with like the mayor of Birmingham being like, oh, what a wonderful blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff. But it was like that stuff always felt kind of, I mean, it's not superfluous. It was nice, but it wasn't the point. The point was the 40,000 people in the stadium and the millions of fans watching it on the streaming who were just communing with like this incredible energy. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Because metal's always been egalitarian to me at its core.
Yeah, metal music got me through some of my hardest years because
Right.
again, it tends to be written and performed by people who have had struggles and especially people who were like bullied as kids and
Yep.
like kind of like I don't say outcasts, but that is how you feel when you're younger and you don't fit. And
Yeah.
metal shows and gigs are the places again where like I've seen bands stop mid-song because
Yeah.
they saw somebody get pushed down and they haven't popped back up yet in the crowd
Yep.
and like oh like
Yep.
and I've had back in my days before my back hurt by just existing
Yeah.
when I used to jump very enthusiastically into a mosh pit. I
Sure.
remember I got knocked absolutely flying once and my shoe flew off. And this
Right.
guy just went, "Oh God, you can't have not have your shoes here." And he just dived in. Got it. So one guy picked me up
Yeah.
immediately so I didn't get trampled on, and another guy just went head first into what looked like a scrum
Yeah.
to get my shoe. And I just thought like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, what, take care now, and then
Yep.
left me alone. And I was like, I would have hung out with those guys all day, but
Right.
there was no like, oh, you owe us now because we like, do you
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
like again, I don't mean to be like that about like that's not
Sure.
all guys, but like it's just what I mean. It's just people are just nice.
Well, also, I mean, to be fair to those guys, they had some more slam dancing to do. Like
Oh yeah, they were
once the
way more
shoes taken care
important.
of, they had their priorities straight, right?
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah. I'm
it's
not
like
saying that every man I interact with acts like that with me or anything, but like
no, no, no.
it's just safer spaces where like
There
people
you
just
go.
seem level and
Yeah.
face value kind of people, I
Absolutely.
think.
And that's been my experience too with metal shows. And the other people I will shout out, the punks. Like I saw Rancid at Brixton Academy like 20 odd years ago. That was the most insane mosh pit I've ever been in. And I've been at Slipknot and Download. I've been Rage Against the Machine at Leeds Festival. But actually Rancid Brixton Academy, that pit was off the hook. But exactly like you said, there was a point there where it completely collapsed. Entire row of people went down. I was one of them. It was a domino effect. And the band just stopped playing. They just
Yeah.
stopped. And they were like, nope, just sort yourselves out, get on your feet. Gave us time. And
Mhm.
they just, the guy just said, no one's getting hurt tonight. We're all here
Yeah.
to have a good time. No one's getting hurt tonight.
Just to circle this back to Keene because we have to
Yeah,
wrap this up.
sure.
When we're talking that kind of nice atmosphere and buzz, I have always
Mm.
wanted to go to AuthorCon
Right.
because every year when it's on, I follow authors on Instagram, and I always see Gemma Moore posting. She'll
Sure.
like go around the whole vending room and be like, "Oh, this is what a room full of vendors at AuthorCon looks like," and you'll just see like so many faces that you're surprised you recognize as a UK reader, because a lot of UK authors will go over for AuthorCon, and then you
Yeah.
see, people that you're a fan of that are from the US or elsewhere. And even from just those little videos that I see other people posting, you can feel I'm like, I want to, it's
Yeah.
not just the books. I'm like, oh, I want to go because everybody seems like they're having such a great time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's I think the community, I don't know if Brian is aware of his role in the American horror
No,
community
absolutely.
and how much has built around him because, again, because of his early blogging and
Yeah.
conventions and his fiction and stuff. But his fans, like, it's a community unto itself, Brian Keene fans, and then the
Absolutely.
horror community by extension. So is is there anything that you would like Brian to know about why you picked him and his work that maybe you'd feel weird about saying to him, you know,
Um,
to his
I don't,
face?
I don't know. I mean, it's weird now. I mean, it's weird now in a different way because I think, through the course of this project, and it still feels a gloriously unlikely thing to say, but I feel like, you know, Brian Keene and I've become friends, and you'll notice that I'm still not entirely comfortable saying that out loud as a sentence, but that's a me thing. That's not a him thing. But yeah, and I think it does make it it hasn't changed the nature of the work at all because I have a responsibility to my readers. I also have actually a responsibility to him to be honest about my reactions. A project like this falls apart completely if you start fudging. Like you can't do it, right? So there's
Mhm.
still the chance I'm going to read something somewhere in the second half and just be like, well, that was a stinker. Like, and if it happens, it'll happen, and we'll deal with it when we get there. But I mean, I think you're right. I think that what maybe he doesn't appreciate that I wish he would is like the enormous importance of the community he's built. And everything you've said is right. Scares that care is super important. Orthicon is super important. The community he built around the horror show. I know he's not doing it anymore. I know he had very good reasons for stopping when he did, but I also think that the legacy of that show is really important. And as you know, again, I said this to him in the interview, but like that's how I found him. And a lot of other readers will have found him. So, I know he's sometimes a little concerned about do people know me for my work or do they just know me because I'm Brian fucking Keene from the horror show or Brian fucking Keene from Scares That Care and stuff. And it's like, I mean, I understand that anxiety and I'm really, I'm honored to have been in a position where I can, if this book has any impact at all in terms of bringing people back to the work, I'll feel great about that because it's great work and people should be reading it and they should be celebrating and enjoying it. But no, not but. And at the same time, I I would like it. I wish he would appreciate a little more just how important the community stuff that he's done is on its own terms. You
Mhm.
know, it's funny. I think the same thing about his non-fiction. I'm probably gonna if I keep going. Well, no, I am gonna keep going with the project, but like I'm probably gonna do his fiction work separately. I'm probably gonna cover that. That might be a volume 3 or volume 4 at the rate that I write and the rate that he writes because I'm not going to keep up. But my idea is I'll loop back and do his non-fiction work. I think his non-fiction work is criminally underrated. I think he's a phenomenal non-fiction writer.
Mhm.
And I don't think he rates his talents there highly enough. And I certainly don't think, his non-fiction books get the attention they deserve. And it's a similar thing, I think, with the community building things that he's done. I think the fans give him credit. I think the community gives him credit, but I don't think he gives himself enough credit for the work he's done there. And I think that's a shame
Mhm.
because I think it's
And
really
the
important.
the impact that he's had and what he means to people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the mentoring work and actually, and we've said it before, but just one more time in terms of like championing new and young and upcoming writers and mentoring them. I mean, the introduction to this book, we've got, we've got Eric LaRocca wrote the introduction of this
yeah,
book. He didn't do that because I wrote it. He did it because it's about Keene, and Keene is, as he says in the introduction, has been a mentor for him. You know?
yeah. And something I'd like to tell Brian, because I'm helping to, just so everybody knows, I'm not making any money from this book. I always have to say that when I'm promoting a
Yeah,
project that I'm in any way related to. I'm not making any money from Kit's book, but I am helping to market it. And one of the things we were doing was like, who might provide a blurb for this? And
mm,
if Keene, if you do see this, I would like you to know that overwhelmingly, like the people that we asked were so excited
yeah,
to get to support a project that was about Brian Keene.
yeah,
The answers, unless anyone was really in a jam and couldn't do it for what for time reasons or whatever, like everyone was just like yes, yes for Brian, yes, and
yeah.
it was as well as for you, Kip. But I just wanted like Brian to know
No,
that. But
absolutely.
it's yeah, it's lovely. It's just lovely to see that kind of community spirit and support,
Yeah,
and anyone doing what they can
yeah,
to participate and
yeah.
promote.
But I also think, again, just to say, like, I do understand Keene's anxiety about, and I think it's an anxiety that's probably common to a lot of pulp writers in particular. And when I use the word pulp, I mean it as a genre title, not as a pejorative. Keene himself has described himself proudly as being in the pulp horror tradition. So I just want to be clear about that as well. I don't see either pulp or literary horror as being something to look down on. I think they're both valid, powerful,
Mhm.
important forms. I love them both. So yeah, don't write in on that. In fact, actually, I was kind of thinking the other day, like, I realize what I do with books like this and with my life in horror, this is pulp criticism is
Mhm.
actually what I'm writing, and I'm really happy with that. I take a pulp approach to the criticism angle rather than the literary approach, and that's again that's an aesthetic. They're both valid, they're both important, but that's I'm really happy that I'm doing that. But yeah, I was thinking about his anxiety about the degree to which, and I think again, a lot of pulp horror writers will think this, like, is it going to live on after me? Are people going to remember this? Do people even remember it now, right? And I think, I think they do. I think the response already that we've had to this project show that they do, right? Just like you say, the number of people who have been wanting to help out, the number of people who've been wanting to give quotes and been really excited to read it. So yeah, I think I hope that anxiety's put to bed a bit as well for
Mhm.
him, and I hope he realizes, like, yeah, I mean, because he should value the stuff he's done for the community more, and his non-fiction should be valuable. But absolutely, people value the fiction, Brian. They absolutely do,
Mhm.
and it's an incredible body of work. And I'm I'm really excited to get to volume two. I'm really excited to see what the back half of the next bit of these 30 books looks like. The next 30
Indeed.
titles.
Yeah, I
Although
can't
by the
wait.
time I get there, you'll have written another 30 or 40, and I'm never going to finish this goddamn project. But never mind, never mind.
Yeah, you'll be like racing him to try to
I mean,
cover all of his
I'm gonna
work.
have to learn to read quicker. It's as simple as that. I'm just gonna
Yeah,
have to learn to read
three books
quicker.
at once in various forms. That's what you're gonna
Yeah,
have to
there you
do.
go. That'll be how I get it done. Yeah.
So, as a place to finish on, I want you to have the last word on this.
Okay.
But the final thing that I would like to let people know about this book is that we have spent like almost this whole hour praising Brian, talking about Brian and horror fiction and everything. I would like to reiterate how wonderful your writing is. I love your nonfiction because you are still always telling a story in your nonfiction. It's such a pleasure to read. Like I don't find that with all nonfiction writers, even if I am interested in the topic. So I do think that this is not just a really well written piece of work, but it's, analytical and insightful, and there's a lot to be gained from it, as well as the lovely commentary on Keene's work. So that's something that I would like people to know about the book as a reader, as a Kit Power fan, and then also you get it's about Brian Keene's work, so you get like kind of a double. It's doubly joyful for me, um, and I know that you don't take compliments very well, so but fuck you, I'm gonna say it anyway.
Okay.
Um,
Fine.
you also, I do think that this is a really, really worthwhile book that deserves the support. I think that what you've done here, as we covered, is chronicle a really influential horror writer in his works and person as a person as well.
Mm.
And I do think credit where it's due. Like this is just a great piece of work, and I do think I'm hoping this is like a trailblazer kind of thing. I know other people have written about other people's works before, but it's like this is just a bit different because of the subject and the genre and everything. So, yes, I think it's a wonderful piece of work. I encourage everybody to pick it up, especially if you're a Keene fan. And if you're not a Keene fan, this will make you like it's inspired me to reread the Keene books I've already read, and it's inspired me to like hurry up and pick up more that you covered that I haven't read yet. It made me excited to get to the many that I haven't got to yet. So that's what I would like to finish on. What would you like to say last?
I mean, firstly, thank you, and I do really appreciate that. I don't take compliments well, but I do appreciate it, and it's very kind. And yeah, I hope other people feel the same, and I hope lots of people read the book because I am proud of it. I'm proud of what I've achieved. I do think that it represents a step forward for my non-fiction from My Life in Horror,
Mhm.
which is also a collection I'm very proud of. But I think something different happens here, and I think you've kind of mentioned it in passing earlier, but it is because because I don't make any pretense at objectivity. I actually, those of you who've read the introduction will already know I get quite grumpy about the notion of objectivity when it comes to non-fiction writing. It is autobiographical, and it was oddly emotional actually putting this one together. I mean, part of that's because it was written over 8 years. I'm rather hoping the next volume will not be written over 8 years. I want to up my rate on this. But you know, a lot happened in those 8 years, and it because of the way I write, and because it's that personal relationship to the work that bleeds in, and so I end up, as with My Life in Horror, I end up with a kind of there's a kind of half-assed autobiography running in the background of these essays.
Mhm.
As I think about saying that, I swear to God, I didn't think of this ahead of time. This is just occurring to me in a similar way that the life of the working class people in the fiction of Keene's work is telling a story. There's a little bit of a story of the last 8 years here, and I think what I what I've enjoyed about the project more than anything is it's really brought home to me how kind of magical just the whole thing is, the whole act of writing, but also the act of reading and being an active reader and being engaged. Because, like, you know, these are books, these books have been out there for a long time. Most of them, Keen fans will have read them several times, maybe. I'm coming to them for the first, but like part of the magic that happens when you read a book is you bring your own life to it, you bring your own experiences to it. You have to. It's actually reading a work of fiction is a collaborative effort. The writer gives you, I think, good fiction writers, and Keene is a good fiction writer, they give you the tools to see the story for yourself,
Mhm.
and they give you enough of a descriptive handle for you to visualize it, but they also give you enough space to bring your own thoughts to it, your own imagination to it. It is a collaborative effort in that sense. And what that means is you never read a book the same way twice, because when you read it, you're reading it with a particular mindset, a particular pair of eyes, a particular perspective based on a particular set of life experiences. Come to that same book 10 years later or 10 years earlier, your reading experience could be very, very different. The text
Mhm.
hasn't changed, you have, and your relationship to it will change as a result. And I think that comes out in the book, in a couple of the essays in particular. I think that surfaces quite nicely. And it's just synchronicity, it's just luck about when I read a certain book and what was going on in my life at the time that's created that. And it really powerful. And it's kind of made me fall in love with reading pulp horror all over again.
Oh, that's
And
so
that's
nice.
such a gift to have, like proper, like, as in, do I really want to stick on the PlayStation tonight, or would I rather read Keene for an hour
Hmm.
or something else? You know what I mean? Like, or
Yeah.
the latest King or whatever. And it's like, no, actually, I'd rather be reading horror. So yeah, I mean, that's the gift the project's given me. I hope that enthusiasm comes across. I hope that love comes across
Oh, yeah.
in the book, and I hope it resonates with people. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, well, that is a lovely end note. So when is the book coming out? You might be yelling. It's coming out on Monday, and I will have links in the description for where you can find it. Also, meant to mention this at the start, the cover art is
Oh my God.
glorious.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she did such a great job. I'm also going to link the cover artist's um, website in the description for anyone
Yeah.
who's interested in that. Of course, I will link Brian's website in the
Sure.
description as well. But yes, Kit, where you can find the book, and all of that information will be in the description for you. Um, wishing you the very, very best book launch day. I'm so excited about it. And yeah, be
Thanks.
sure to follow and check the book out, everybody. And we'll say goodbye to you now, but we will see you again soon. Wait, hang on. I'm just trying to find the button awkwardly. Let me just,
Oh,
geez,
that was you covered so smoothly. No one will ever notice. It's fine.
everyone forget what I just said. We're finishing there really cleanly and smoothly. Goodbye, everybody, and bleat.